I think about you, and I think of you as like this. I think of you as a proper yogi. You know, somebody that really has wisdom in this world. And I'm always so impressed how you just keep teaching at the places, you know, all the local places, at Prema, at Ashtanga, around Shala. So then I thought, you know, thinking of Fiona and all this stuff, and it's like, you know, these kids have been labeled the anxious generation.
Right.
There's that Jonathan Haidt book out now called The Anxious Generation. And I wish I did Ashtanga right before my Fiona was born, actually. I got into a practice at the Shala in the East Village. Yeah. So I did it. And then when you were born, it's like the whole morning practice just evaporated because I work full time. So my time with my baby was 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then I would go off to work.
Yeah.
And although you can do Ashtanga in the afternoon, that was not going to happen for me. Yeah. So my practice evaporated. So I'm one of those like drop-in yogis. And when I go to yoga, I'm like, oh my God, I need to be here, you know, and then I twirl off into my ridiculous life. How did you become a yoga?
Start this whole thing?
It's you know, I was number 6 of 7. My mother got me involved with ballet early on. So I was a dancer most of my childhood. And because of my father's work moving, I left studying ballet very seriously to not having dance. I finally got back to the States from having lived in Germany. And I was an athlete because I needed to move my body, and that was the most accessible. So I was a runner, I was track and field, and slowly made my way back to dance. But really what got me there was yoga, and it was Sarasat Singh, my brother, who introduced me to yoga when I was like 15, 16.
Quick interruption. Tell us about your brother. I forgot this piece of Cutrona lore.
He has a very interesting story, and he's a great storyteller. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but he was a West Point student. My father was in the military and a commanding officer. Mark Stephen Cutrona was the 4th son, 5th child, and went to West Point in my father's footsteps, but had a rebellious side. You know, was this Olympic swimmer, had a rebellious side, and was actually asked to leave West Point. I'm not sure what the infraction was, but anyhow, he was asked to leave, and so he moved with us to Germany when my father was assigned to Darmstadt. And in Darmstadt, or before he left, he had started yoga. And then in Darmstadt, he began teaching GI's yoga. He was of the moment, a hippie, you know, and traveling throughout Europe, fell in love with an enlisted officer's wife who was the librarian, and they met as Sarasat, then Mark, was looking for a biography of a yogi in the library, and she found it for him, and they shared this conversation that began their friendship. And then they fell in love, and they were married, or I would still say they're married to this day. They were, for me as a young person, were just exquisite. They returned, they had to leave Germany because there was lots of scandal with my brother falling in love with an enlisted officer's wife. And so they left, and I think they landed in Boston, or at some point they got to Boston very early on, and Yogi Bhajan was there, and they met Yogi Bhajan, and that's when the Kundalini thing started getting going. And they were really there at the beginning.
What year was this? What year is that?
1973, I think, is when they met Yogi Bhajan. We returned in 73, and so he joined what was really this really sort of utopian, or said to be a utopian lifestyle, living in a ashram, right? Men and women were separated, and in DC they opened the Golden Temple, this beautiful restaurant. And being, you know, little Miss Tippy, we would hitchhike down to Georgetown on the weekend, and then we'd go to Golden Temple, and he invited me to the ashram to spend the night and learn this incredible cheesecake that they made, and I adored him. They were so inspiring. And to this day, I would say they're inspiring in terms of a couple and a relationship and the way they held one another for 40 years. And their wedding was the most exquisite wedding I'd have ever been. Well, I was 16, you know, and they were feeding one another fruit from a bowl, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to get married like that. And, you know, all perfect and idolized, and I've I've idolized him most of my life, but I got him to teach yoga in my high school. People shouted towel heads, because we were in the gym. And then I began practicing, but I was, like wore the turban, wore all white. It was this very beautiful collective utopian lifestyle. And then that sort of shifted a little bit. But nevertheless, he introduced me to yoga. And, he was one of 3 men who were assigned to make a tea. They use these big wooden barrels. In DC, they're alleys behind the alleyways, behind houses. And they would put these herbs in a big old barrel and roll it down the alley and begin to mix things like this. Very DIY, right? And that became Yogi Teas. Yogi Teas, I think their first big company, and then the Peace cereals, and it became this big, many different franchises.
What did your dad think about your brothers when he dropped out of
over the
West Point?
years there was this, and this, right? But they're kind of similar in a way. I mean, my brother had his heart open. My father was a narcissist. So anyhow, but the success of his story was something my father could relate to, be proud of. And he became, very successful. And that my father took pride in. And so they did make peace. They made peace.
I love Fiona's question, though, because I think your dad was a general, wasn't he?
Yeah. It was a really radical, he gave up his name. It was Sada Mark, and then it was Sada Satsi.
It's like, what do my parents think about what I'm doing?
Yeah.
It's very bold of him. And, they lived in LA for 30 years, and my other brothers and sisters sort of making fun of that choice, right? It's a name choice. They wore white all the time. It was really, radical departure from society as we knew it. Right?
I was just thinking while you were saying that, how like what he's doing kind of sounds in a way similar to like this period of time, what you're doing. So maybe talk some about what you do now in Brooklyn.
Yeah. So I never thought I'd be a yoga teacher. I studied dance in Bennington and came and danced in the city professionally for a number of years. I'd say for about 15 years, maybe a little bit longer. And, that is a hard life. And I think it's wonderful, those who really stay committed, but it's also a very isolating life, and I wanted a life. I worked in the evening, I danced during the day, things like that, and sort of chasing my tail. And so I wanted to have a life with someone. I stopped pretty abruptly, and it was a heart wrench. But this was also at another juncture in time, similar to the one we're in. It was during Reagan's era, and he did all sorts of things that sets us up for where we are now. And part of that was disbanding the National Endowment of the Arts. And it was a crisis, it was a crisis. And so the access to funding became more and more limited. And really, then of course, you begin to see the patterns of how grants are issued, nepotism, right? And, who was I to sort of enter into that? Now, some certainly had that strength and carried on, but the resources for support for the arts was at a minimum, very minimized then. And so I opted to pause. I think I did a last piece, which might be in a space, might be the first city winery. I can't remember what it was called, but anyhow. So you think you're going to travel. And it was sort of about this new chapter in my life, which I used a film of a highway road, just a yellow double lane road with the yellow line between it, just ongoing. I was on a new trajectory. And so I began to work in fashion, not again by design, sort of by accident. No one studies in college to become a rep, and it was relatively new, maybe in the late 80s, after fashion was exploding. And I worked for a woman who had studied or worked with Xavier Moreau. So she was sort of groomed in fashion rep from a pretty high entity at that time. And so I worked in fashion, representing, starting with accounting work. Then I learned to, because she was often absent, to really be the voice for the photographers and between the photographers and the client. And in that, I really learned the skills on the job. And then from there went to a couple different agencies, setting up my own Jam Arts with Louis Van Arnhem, and worked in fashion repping for 25 years. And I often say, it really helped me as well, raise my family, build a life. And then it became, feeling like I was the mother to children I didn't birth, and nothing was enough, And I'm like,
It's yeah. I'm in that place now where I'm like, it's been a great career, but I'm sort of like, I believe in life as service, right? And I'm helping these people and I'm getting paid for it, but I feel like I want to help in a different way. I want to use my instrument differently in the world.
I
And
think
so,
just stating that the answer comes, it'll come, and maybe this is part of the answer that you're
yeah.
creating here. And I too, like, I thought I was going to open up an art center for children, and being a parent myself, I'm like, I'm not taking on the parents. Oh my God, forget it. Opening up that. And then I was a pretty regular practitioner then at Jivamukti for many, many years. And when they moved on to, I think it was the years they moved from Lafayette to Broadway, one of the teachers that I studied with, Kelly Morris, came up to me and said, why don't you take my training? And I'm like, me? Are you kidding me? But I was studying Buddhism at the time, and I knew this teaching, whatever the doorway presents, you walk through. You don't close the door, you open the door. And so I said, why don't I? And so I never thought I'd be a teacher, but I had a pretty strong practice and had been studying a lot of the philosophy that she brought in. I started teaching right away. I started teaching for her, and then I started teaching at the Shala in the city, and then helped her with the teacher training program for 8 years. And just, I didn't look back. And for the first 5 years, I continued my job and taught, which was very tough. And when I finally left representing fashion artists, hair, makeup, and wardrobe stylists at the time, I had no regrets. I stopped, and I had no regrets, and I've had no regrets ever since. It's demanded a lot of me. I mean, I still to this day teach every day of the week, and that's why I go on sabbaticals in the summer, which I just came back from. But the teaching has been a teaching for me. The becoming a teacher, I feel like I'm still becoming a teacher, has been really a great evolution in my life, and just, finding my voice in different ways, and really studying and trying to share what I study, rather than preach from the position of a teacher. The word guru, it means to remove the darkness. So it's a beautiful philosophy that I'm a believer in a guru, but just like there are some bad mothers, some great mothers, we don't do away with motherhood. I don't think we should do away with this idea that you study under someone to really have the lineage passed on to you. I think it's a great relationship that opens you up, but never do you self-abnegate. Never do you turn yourself over to the teacher. It's the teachings. And
my mother was a devotee of Guru Nityananda in
wow.
the Siddha Yoga, but never, she never met him. She just became a devotee because she was in the Nityananda temple in South Fallsburg, and she had like this profound experience, and she connected to him.
Wow.
But I spent my summers going to that ashram.
Wow.
We camped probably starting in 1980, 81
Okay.
to 80 to 1989. We were there every summer.
Wow.
So I did intensives there, and I had a Kundalini experience, and we did all this stuff. So how do you see, like this, I think about these Gen Z kids, the anxious generation and digital and, all that. Do you see young people coming into yoga practice? How do you see?
So I feel that experience that they've had, the COVID experience, that we haven't recovered from. And now we have a couple of other traumas that we're in the midst of, still in the midst of. And so when the studios reopened again and I taught online, I came back from a retreat on a Thursday. We were in lockdown on a Sunday. And so started teaching, out of my bedroom. Now, when the studios reopened, I was in tears a lot of the time, because a lot of the younger people who started, just because they had been in lockdown for so long and isolated, coming into a studio, like their bodies were hard and they were like deers in a headlight. Their eyes kind of dart, like this nervous, anxious eye, just didn't know how to be in a space. And so it really pushed me to change many ways and to really make it safe for them. I wanted to show them discipline, that the discipline is liberating, but also I wanted to be in care of them, be in care. And I'm not talking about a shrink. I'm not trying to confuse my roles, but to really invite them into safety. Many of those bodies or those isolated beings hadn't the discipline yet. And so I really began, I started seeing it a lot in 2 classes that were just an hour's length, because also the COVID time, we lost our attention capacity. And many,
100%.
you know, like an hour class, nobody could do an hour and a 2-hour class. Are you kidding me? People would freak out.
Yeah.
I'm always asking for an hour and a half. They're like, oh,
when I started yoga at Jivamukti back in the East Village, every yoga class was an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours. Every class.
Yeah.
You never had an hour class.
Yeah.
Never.
I
Ray
literally
Brown, that's
cannot imagine doing that. I cannot imagine.
I know, that's so interesting to me. So I tried with, like, we would hold postures for a little bit longer than people, and then counter to that, on all the platforms, you see people not holding postures at all. People, I don't know, it's dance, it's movement online. No one was holding a dynamic posture. That's where the yoking happens. Right? That's where the action counteraction happens. But I think it was not only an attention problem, the body is also holding trauma. To stay in a place felt traumatizing.
I would love to know, as a yogi, how you define the word trauma. And I want to understand what yoking means.
I'm going to start with what yoking means. So yoke, we actually get the English word yoke from the Sanskrit root yuj. The root of yoga is yuj, Y-U-J. And from Y-U-J, we get yoke. We also get union. And so we understand from that Sanskrit root, we get the English cognate, and we get these words, union, yoke. So we understand through this word, yoga, which we say, it's about yoking and joining, connecting, bridging, action, counteraction to find the midline. You can't find the midline if you have no boundary. So yoga is working with form to experience formlessness. It's working with connection to find liberation. It's much like many autistic beings feel freedom in a tight, closed space. They can unwind their nervous system. And so how to build a posture, seat, and asana is seat, a posture that allows people to feel form, that they breathe in to feel the yoking, to feel the yuj. That's the liberation. And so what I view trauma is, in my experience, I'm not a clinician, right? In my basic human understanding and some research, trauma is something that happens in the body, right? An event happens and you respond to it. The trauma happens inside. This is really coming from Gabor Mate. The trauma is your response to this episode that happened. Now, the episode, it's not that it has no flavor. It has a flavor. Maybe you weren't hugged enough as a child. Maybe you were ignored. It has a flavor. But our response to it begins to lock the experience in the body. And because that experience is unpleasant, the nervous system gets triggered in. And we come into this aspect of the nervous system that protects. So that protection is individual, whether you freeze, whether you grip, or whether you run away. You do one of those 3 things. And then the experience stays with you until you can recognize that the trauma is within me, that there are tools of opening it up. I will always live with that trauma, but it doesn't need to be locked in my body any longer. And so this is with the work of healing, right? Is doing some investigation to where and when it happened. This is now called the new trend phrase, shadow work, right? So we go to the trauma and we appreciate that younger self who managed to survive and protect herself, but she no longer needs to do that. So your present self sort of parents that younger self, and we set her free. So when you meet another incident that's similar, you don't lock in. You don't freeze, or you don't run away. And so we begin to work with that trauma. And it's not like yoga is a trauma release practice. I'm not suggesting that. It can be. It unlocks a lot. if you can stay with the unlocking, which is a little uncomfortable because it's all those emotions that come to the surface, it's the tears that come to the surface. And sometimes those are also tears of joy. If we can stay with the release, and with great awareness and with great stewardship, maybe someone to receive you, it becomes this way in which you can unlock what's being held in the body. And for every single one of us, we're holding something. And little by little, as we evolve and grow and hopefully mature and really turn the lens inward and liberate ourselves in some capacity through some body work, some embodied practice, some form of meditation, some form of self-reflection, and some form of encouragement to self, some form of self-love, we begin to unlock that. And it's it's revelatory. It's a liberation that is actually, people speak of a hip that's been tight their whole life is suddenly opened. Things like this can happen. It's not what we're looking for, but yoga creates the conditions for a union to happen.
The yoking. Yoking is the union.
Yeah.
Do you see any differences between like how men and women respond to like the yoga practice?
It's interesting. I do. And I don't know. I attract a lot of men into my classes because they're dynamic. Some of the hour and a half classes that I do are really dynamic, and dudes like to work hard. One of my hard working students who has been there with me since the studio opened has also gone through a great heart opening experience and will be in tears, like deep sobs at some point in his practice. And we've moved together through this experience. It has been heart opening for me and heart opening for him, who never would have allowed something like that to happen before.
I think that one of the somatic work is like the new like shadow work, all this stuff. Like I've been in therapy for my whole adult life, and at some point the talking and the telling of the story with your mouth and your head gets old. It's like my mother, it's like you just loop on the story in your head, and then you don't grow. It's my experience. I don't grow past it. I don't release it. And my nervous system, even though I got sober when I was 24, even though I let go of eating disorder and this and that and all this crazy addiction stuff, right? I still was reacting to life from that protective mechanism,
ingrained,
that I learned as a child and my protective mechanism is more of the fight, fawn, rather than freeze and flight, right? I'm going to fawn, I'm going to fix, I'm going to seduce you, I'm going to make it better, I'm going to make you like me, I'm going to, but it's still all that, it's still it's the nervous system response.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question is because like I feel like a lot of men, at least my age, are like averse to talk therapy. So something like a yoga practice is more physical. So I was just wondering if like it's more responsive in that way.
Yeah, I'm seeing more young men come in, which is really awesome. And it's not easy because yoga is expensive, and all the things, and seeing more young men come in. I host women's circles as well, which I've done for a number of years, and it's always evolving. And at a studio in the city, I opened it up to men. I would say first 6 circles, men showed up. It was like, oh, to do deep breath work, to do some somatic practices, but also to do holotropic breath work. Now, holotropic breath work can bring out the bros. It's really bro work, in a way, and they do it maybe too hard. Sometimes I'm like, relax, don't work so hard. So that was so encouraging to me. Now, it ebbs and flows. And I'm just pausing there for a little bit. I have circles that I do here in Brooklyn, and we'll come back to that because I think we're in a place, I'm of two minds. Women's circles need to continue, but also men and women need to circle and do this work together, this healing work of speaking, process to discovery. It's like breath. I used to title these circles breath to muse to pen, because through the breath work you tap into the deepest reserves of energy, the deepest flows, the deepest pains, the deepest narratives held in the body. They come to the surface, and so there's an energetic experience, and there's also a story liberation, a liberation of a story, and then we always write to that a little bit. And I was very encouraged to see men really participate in that in the last year, in the first 6 months of those circles. And we'll see. I hope I can set another community circle to bring both men and women together to do that.
I have another question about gender and yoga. I'd heard that originally in India, it was a men's practice. And now, of course, in the West, it's like women it's like women. Is that true? Is that...
I won't speak to that as an empirical truth. I know that yoga was used as a healing modality. Both two lineages that I practice the most, Ashtanga and Iyengar, were begun by young men, BKS Iyengar and Sri K. Patabi Joyce, who had physical ailments and were physically healed. And so it was used as a healing modality. And men, women, and certainly it did not take place in the same way it takes place here. Like a yoga shala that people went to became a new phenomenon more in the, I would say, 60s, 70s, that yoga shalas, this is when Mysore Shala was set up by Sri K. Patabi Joyce, and I know in Pune, BKS Iyengar set up his studio. And first there were demonstrations, kind of community demonstrations, to sort of work through the community who had a bad back, who had an ailment. Certainly the West, as yogis traveled east, it became, a thing, a trend, a healing modality, a different lifestyle. It became all those things that many people have taken issue with. The issue of appropriation. Well, I think humans have been appropriating from one another. That's how we learn. We learn over millennia our traditions. I don't take issue with that. I take issue with spiritual bypass. I take issue with someone elevating themselves above and beyond their students. I take issue with too much embellishment that separates a hierarchical view of the. I'm on my hands and knees with my knees scraped, just like y'all, right? I'm suffering through life just like y'all. Life is humbling. This is something we all have access to process, to really process. For a long time, I'm like, I don't know about this enlightenment thing. I don't know if it's for me. But it is a word that physically happens in the body through the practices of yoga. We transform this dense body, and you felt it, I'm sure, to a body lighter, able to jump and land lighter. It actually happens. The body becomes lighter. And so we sort of see it's alchemical. It really, enlightenment is also not disappearing. It's not a runaway. You're still also going to come down and have your knees scraped and be with the people. Lord Buddha was with the people. And he never said, oh, I'm enlightened. Someone said, what's up with you? And he said, are you a saint? He said, no, I'm not a saint. What are you, some magician? No, I'm not a magician. He's walking on a path. He had just woken up, and this guy's trying to understand, why do you look different? What is up with you? And he just turned and said, I'm awake. I'm just awake. This idea of awakening the tissues of the body, you feel different. You respond to life different.
Spiritual bypass. I love that term.
Yeah.
I see it most often as avoiding the shadow and avoiding accepting my own selfishness, for instance, and my own fear and my own. It's like I feel like I have to see it and own it so completely that I am afraid, that I am selfish, that I can be dishonest with myself, that I am living in delusion.
Yeah.
In order to find any even glimmer of awake.
You have to go through, the dark night of the soul. Everyone has to journey through that. And it doesn't mean you'll never have to do that again. Right? And I think partly the spiritual bypass is that, I never have to do that again because everything's empty. That was a big phrase in my studies of Buddhism and lots of spiritual bypass in that community. It's like, no, the asana doesn't matter. Everything's empty. Everything's empty. That's spiritual bypass. Emptiness is the interdependence of all things. It's not that nothing matters. Nihilism is nothing matters. Emptiness, and our understanding of emptiness is suggesting that everything matters. What you say, what you think, what you do, everything matters. And everything has a flavor of awakening. Everything has a flavor of awakening. And so spiritual bypass is like, oh, I've done that already. I don't need to do that again. Oh, I've done my shadow work. I never need to do that again. That's not true. It comes up. It's in a cycle of a day. It comes up multiple times. We trip on ourselves over and over again. Humility, right? Humus. We are human. We are of the humus. We are of the earth. Humility is part of our lineage, part of our awakening. Humility. And if we can remember that our feet still touch the ground, you know, and the elevation of kings, you know, like they're carried on a palanquin. They don't touch the ground. Or, you know, John Gotti, I used to see walk through my neighborhood all the time, lived in Italy when in the 80s, right? He didn't touch the ground because they were like, yo, Sammy the Bull was behind him. It was like his feet didn't touch the ground. But that's a kind of bypass because he's on the back of all the people that suffered to make his kingdom.
If you were to give 19-year-old Maria or 25-year-old Maria some advice, what would you say?
You know, when you approached me and I received that email and I read that question, see, I'm crying. I was like, this is the question. This is the question. This is also shadow work. This is also such a beautiful, beautiful question, such a beautiful, beautiful invitation. I'm like breathing this, whatever, all these weeks in between. Like when she asked me that question, I don't want to burst into tears. I would say, I love you, number one. I would say, I love your strength and your commitment that have been there from the day you were born. I love your strength and I love your commitment because here I am. And I would say, baby, sweetheart, mother was dying at that time in my life. Trust that you have been imprinted with a very beautiful imprint of love and faith of self, because you are divine. You are, you know, I was raised Catholic, many issues with that, but it also brought me in touch with Mary Magdalene, and reading her gospel is everything. And she was Christ's disciple, and Christ really taught her a tantric practice to see everything as divine, And I didn't know that then. And I would say to her, your sacrifice is equal to the gift that's on its way to you every moment that you inhale. Your sacrifice is the same as the gift, and you will come to learn that. Your hard work, your perseverance is miraculous and a gift, and you will make it. And you don't feel that way now, but you will make it. Us keep putting one foot in front of the other. You are blessed. You are blessed. Your sacrifice is the same as the gift. It's coming. Keep going.
That's amazing. Fiona, how does that hit with you?
Inspiring, honestly.
This has been incredible. I just, it's beautiful. I think that's the thing about the love. You know, my mom wasn't really in my life so much because she had a nervous breakdown, and when I was 3, she left really and did this spiritual journey. So although we did the ashram stuff, like it was mixed because I felt like she was with God and the guru, but not with me. So I had a big resentment.
Yeah.
You know, so it's sort of a miracle that I even am on a spiritual path and that I'm open, because I felt very abandoned by her for her search for self and peace and fulfillment, you know, but she couldn't like do the day to day because honestly her anxiety was so intense that she was using all this stuff just to soothe her anxiety, but she couldn't do like regular life stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I had a lot of resentment, you know, around that.
Yeah.
So I feel grateful to be able to find my way back to.
I hear you, Tara. It's such an interesting story. We have much more to talk about.
Anyway, wait, but my point was not that. My point was the mother.
Yeah.
Right? And the things I'm hearing you say that you would say to your younger self are very the mother, like to me.
I too miss something. Yeah, I too.
Right, or divine father. But that thing, and I remember talking to Elizabeth about that. When you lose your mother,
Yeah.
you know, it's young, you know, when you need your mother. Like we need our mother,
Yeah.
you know, and so I feel like someone like you is like my mother. Like when I have gone to your class, I'm like I'm being held in something that feels loving and true.
I think this is one thing that we are discovering in this crazy ass time. Sorry, is that community can provide that mothering. Community can provide that mothering, and we have to seek it in all kinds of ways.
Yeah,
And we
so
can
that
create it.
Yeah, and create it.
And because when Fiona thinks about going into the work, she's still in college, but the workforce, and hearing I'm going to be at home by myself on Zoom, she hates it. Hates it.
Nightmare.
Because she wants to be in community. We all do.
Yeah,
you know?
we all do.
And it's like, it's heartbreaking that it's like, it's such a commodity. You know, I just heard this crazy thing, like I was following about, you know, in the future, we're going to be paying people to go on a walk with us. You know, that's like the commodification of actually the human, I mean, the human experience is going to be so precious.
Oh my God.
So precious, right? Because the digital experience is ubiquitous.
Yeah.
You know.
Here.
So, anyway, we have so much more to talk about.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be well. Ciao, ciao.